Today, many students go to college with numerous questions about their faith, yearning to know if the seed planted in them as a child is both true and practical. Using the miracle on the road to Emmaus as a model, young adult ministers conversed weekly for 3 months with college students about the most pressing questions they had about the Catholic faith. As they journeyed together virtually, something amazing happened. Doubts disappeared, fears faded, and Jesus revealed that He is still alive. Hearts Burning Within Us, the latest book from Patchwork Heart Ministry, is a result of that grace-infused conversation. It is the perfect back-to-school gift for recent high school graduates and current college students. Get your copy for them today at patchworkheart.org or by calling 424-704-3278. That's 424-704-3278. Welcome to the Sowing Hope podcast. This is a show all about implanting hope in our hearts. I'm Bill Snyder, joined by my friend Ann DeSantis. We're glad you're here for our uplifting conversation about faith and how it sustains our hearts through all the seasons of life. Thanks for walking with us. Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Sowing Hope. I am Bill Snyder. It's great to be with you today. And just a reminder that you can always follow our ministry very simply at Sowing Hope at patchworkheart.org. Follow us on social media. All you got to do is search for SEWING Hope. Today I am not joined by my co-host Ann DeSantis, but a shout out to her and all of her family. Just great to know them, and wish she was joining us today, but can't be here. So anyway, we have a wonderful guest for you. His name is Tony Kolenc. Tony. He is the author of the teen historical fiction series, The Harwood Mysteries, which has won 7 book awards. He is also the host of the Shepherd's Pie radio show and podcast, which focuses on issues that impact young people today. He is an author of fiction and nonfiction books and articles and a columnist for Practical Homeschooling magazine. He retired as a lieutenant colonel from the U.S. Air Force Judge Advocate General's Corps after 21 years of military service. He currently teaches law at the University of North Texas Dallas College of Law, and he speaks at writing, legal, and homeschool events. Tony and his family live in Jacksonville, Florida. It's much warmer there, Tony, isn't it, than here in Wisconsin?
Thank you so much, Bill. It's really a pleasure to be on the show. I really wish Ann could be here too, but you'll just have to send her my regards.
And it just means we have to have you back.
There you go. Oh, that's even better in that case.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So one of the things we always do on this podcast, and you have a fascinating story, one of the things we always like to lead off with is just whatever the Holy Spirit is putting on your heart about your personal journey that you want to share with our audience today.
Gosh, I think, like many people, I think my personal journey has taken me in a lot of different paths throughout my life. Unfortunately, oftentimes straying off of the path that I should be on, but thankfully God is a merciful God and always seems to call me back to the right spot. And, today we're actually talking on the Feast of the Immaculate Conception. And it's actually the 40th anniversary of my own father's death, actually, when I was 12 years old. So that's on my heart today as I think about that. And, I know we're going to be talking about my books and, some of what I went through as a kid, I think I've channeled into some of the story of my characters, my books too. So I'm thinking about that a little bit today for sure.
Absolutely. Well, we'll pray for your father as well. What was his first name?
Ernest Kolenc. Yes.
What a beautiful name. So certainly pray for him today and lift him up. But let's jump in with the books then. And share with us about the Harwood Mysteries, this book series, right? It's a book series.
It is. It is an ongoing series published by Loyola Press. It is inspirational historical fiction for kids ages 10 and up, middle school, high school, even college. There are currently 3 published books in the series, and the 4th one is at Loyola right now and will hopefully be released in summer of 2022. I could show you some of the covers if you want. There's 3 of them. The first one is called Shadow in the Dark, and the second one is the Haunted Cathedral, and the third one is the Fire of Eden. These covers, were done very well by Loyola Press, and it's an exciting kind of, when I was writing the stories, I was trying to channel sort of the exciting, spooky vibe that you might get from a Harry Potter series, but mixing it with, instead of some of the baggage that Harry Potter brings, instead mixing it with some good baggage and some great messages for teenagers, some religious themes. And even though the books get a little spooky and we look at, some creepy figures roaming around the Abbey grounds, or rumors of ghosts in cathedrals or wizards. In the end, as your audience might suspect, good prevails, and we realize that God is good, and there's nothing in the books that would be offensive to a Christian Catholic audience.
Awesome stuff. And tell me a little bit about the historical fiction. One of the first things I noticed was like the very first page of this, as I opened it up, and it said that historical fiction is different than fiction, and it gave a really nice description. But talk about that for our audience, and talk about that for young people in particular. How should they approach reading this, and why is historical fiction different?
Yeah, so, and Loyola Press actually, that was their idea to put that at the beginning of each of these books, because they really did. I mean, they're marketing this in a way that you could use these books as a supplement to like a homeschool curriculum or a private school, social studies or history or literature series that's learning about the Middle Ages or the Crusades or monastic life or something like that, which are topics that, they touch on at different points in kids' education, or at least they should. But with historical fiction, what we're doing, like my books are set, actually, I created an abbey. So Harwood Abbey, where my main character Zan is a peasant boy in 12th century England. I guess I should probably tell you this, right?
Hey.
And his village is attacked by bandits at the beginning of Shadow in the Dark. And he winds up losing his family and losing his memory. And he winds up getting found by the monks of Harwood Abbey, and they're Benedictine monks, and they wear black robes. And so they call them the black monks. And so the first book especially takes place at Harwood Abbey, which is a fictional abbey in Yorkshire, England, in 1184 AD. So with historical fiction, sometimes we might, use actual historical events and maybe set our characters in the middle of them. I do that in book 2, The Haunted Cathedral, where the most of the action takes place in the town of Lincoln, England, and there are 2 beautiful landmarks there. If anybody's ever been to England, Lincoln Castle and Lincoln Cathedral are both 2 major, tourist attractions today. And Lincoln Cathedral, or at least a former version of it, was standing in 1184. And there's like a major historical event that goes on in book 2 at the climax of the book. And my character Zan and his best friend Lucy, both teenagers, find themselves in the middle of this historical event. But sometimes historical fiction is just placing characters in a time period. And like for book 1, like I said, I made up the abbey, but it's sort of a representative abbey. And the events, I kind of relay life in a peasant village during the time of feudalism, where you have these landlords and the serfs who were living. And so Dan's family were serfs. And so you kind of see what it was like to live in a feudal society, and you see how monastic life operated in the Middle Ages. You kind of get a glimpse at the everyday life of the monks and how they pray 7 times a day, and how they're copying the sacred scriptures and the classics of Greek and Roman antiquity. And we learn about some of the historical conflicts between King Henry II and the Pope and things like that. So, so depending on the book, it may be more or less historical in exactly what's going on, but the purpose is to entertain, but also to sort of teach kids. And so that's really my hope for the series. We were homeschoolers, and everything we do as homeschoolers, we want to teach kids as we're doing it. And so, I wanted this to be kind of spooky, and I wanted there to be good themes, but I wanted kids to learn about the Middle Ages. And this time in the Middle Ages is particularly fascinating, because it comes just a few years after the martyrdom of Thomas Becket. King Henry II was the king who was blamed for the murder of Thomas Becket in the cathedral, and it comes between the Second and the Third Crusades, and so there's lots of really interesting historical things going on. We're just actually a few years before Saint Francis or Saint Dominic appear on the scene in other parts of the world, but there's all sorts of cool stuff going on. I try to illustrate it, but without the books seeming like they're a history lesson. I mean, the books are meant to entertain and sort of draw the kids into this kind of spooky mystery.
Yeah, it's really fascinating how you mentioned that there are lessons to be learned from this time period of the Middle Ages, and it's relevant for today's teens. Are there any particular themes throughout the three books that you've written that you really want kids to learn? What are those lessons that you want kids to learn from in the book?
The books, the overarching theme of the entire series is really, it's a coming of age series about vocation. What does God want for my life? And this is something that all of us go through throughout our lives. I mean, I don't know at your age, but at my age, I'm still right now thinking, what does God want me to do in my life? And I'm a bit older than you. And kids, of course, as they're coming into their teenage years and they're going from childhood into adulthood, and in the Middle Ages, that happened a lot younger than it does today. These were real questions for my characters. Lucy is seriously thinking about becoming a nun. Zan is trying to figure out, should he become a monk or should he go live with his uncle in Lincoln and become a merchant's apprentice? So the stories are ultimately about vocation and following God's will. But each book sort of has its own main theme that goes through it. So book one is a bit really about suffering and why do bad things happen to good people? Because Zan winds up having a lot of bad things happen to him throughout the book, and he struggles with it, and his faith is struggling with it, and he's trying to figure out, why this is happening, as he's also trying to solve these kind of spooky mysteries going on. And so there's some beautiful passages where, he's talking with one of the nuns and about suffering. And for instance, she also had a tough life, and he's asking her about how she got through it. And she basically takes the crucifix around her neck and points to the suffering Christ on the cross. And so there's some discussion then later, as he's coming to terms with the idea that God understands our suffering, and how it's tied and it's wrapped up in the suffering of Christ even. And so book one is a little bit about that. Death and suffering is sort of like the overarching theme. Book two is about forgiveness. In the Haunted Cathedral, Zan winds up having to travel to Lincoln from the Abbey with the bandit who killed his family. And he's, the bandit is going to face a trial in Lincoln at the King's royal courts. And it just so happens by a twist of fate, if you will, that Zan is traveling with the very bandit that he hates. And the bandit is very remorseful and would like forgiveness, but Zan does not seem like he wants to forgive because he's holding on to this hatred. And so throughout the book, you see Zan kind of struggling with, Christ's message that we should love our enemies, forgive, pray for those who persecute us, and this kind of thing. And Zan kind of is discovering the hard way what happens if you hold on to your hatred and refuse to forgive. And then in book three, The Fire of Eden, it's actually a jewel thief mystery. One of the monks who comes from a very wealthy family has a precious ruby that belongs to his family. And on the eve of the monk's ordination, the ruby gets stolen. The ruby is actually called Eden's Fire, because it has this flashing, when you flash light on it, it looks like the flaming sword and the cherubim in the Garden of Eden. So they named it Eden's Fire. And it's stolen. And the spooky looking wizard on the cover is one of the on the cover of the book is one of the suspects. But the book is really about pride, and all the characters are sort of struggling to one way or another with pride. And so that's the theme of book 3.
You know, these all sound like amazing books and themes that we would want young people to, you know, explore in their lives. Understanding these overarching themes at a young age is so important, and using your imagination like Tony has clearly done to move through these stories and teach valuable lessons to young people, middle schoolers, high schoolers, college age even. It's a great thing. So, maybe talk with us a little bit about the places people can get these. How can people support your work? I think too, in writing these is also really important, because I know there's another one coming, right? Book 4, you mentioned it's going to be out. It's an ongoing series. So tell people where they can get them, because we're at the heart of the gift giving season here with Christmas. So these would make great gifts. Tell people where they can get them and what they can, where they can get stuff and support your work.
Sure. Well, of course, first of all, my website is antonykolenc.com. That's ANTONYKOLENC.com. And I have links to the harwoodmysteries.com, which is my other sort of book series website. And there's places you can go to buy them. You can, of course, buy them on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. You can buy them from Loyola Press. If there's time in the season, though, go to your local bookstore, your local Catholic store, and support your mom and pop local bookstore. A lot of them are stocking it on their shelves. And if they're not stocking it, you can ask them to get it. Now, if we're this close to Christmas, that might not be a possibility. You may be stuck with Amazon Prime to get it to you in time. But I like to encourage people to support their local bookstores, because we often forget how hard it is. I just came from a conference where, we had a lot of Catholic booksellers there and bookstores. And, these are just mom and pop operations a lot of times. And, they're struggling to stay in business. So, but yeah, so are us starving authors, right? I'm not exactly a starving author because I'm a lawyer and a law professor. But if I had to rely on my income from writing the Harwood Mysteries, my family would all be starving right now. That's for sure.
Well, that is so important, and so supporting those local Catholic bookstores is great. I kind of want to shift gears a little bit, Tony. I would talk about your podcast too. As we're about halfway through, I figure, hey, let's talk a little bit about your podcast, The Shepherd's Pie. I know it's a relatively new podcast out there in the grand scheme of podcasting, but talk to us a little bit about the goal of it for young people, and who is it for, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, as I was marketing my books, which are really an outreach to youth, as we've been talking about, trying to reach youth where they're at today. And I was actually being interviewed by a Catholic radio station last summer, and they said, WQPH in Massachusetts, and they said, have you thought about the possibility of developing like a radio show where you could talk about like issues involving youth, since we were talking about all these things that you and I were just talking about. And I prayed about it and thought about it, and I said, all right, that actually sounds like a pretty cool idea. I can make it a podcast. It's broadcast, on WQPH, and hopefully I can get it on other Catholic radio stations out there also. It's not really an exclusive thing. But it's a podcast that sort of is a natural outgrowth from what I'm doing with the books. It talks to parents, grandparents, teachers, youth ministers, pastors, whoever. It's an ecumenical show, and I talk about issues that impact youth today, whether it's dealing with anxiety, whether it's how can we use, fiction to help kids, learn good lessons, whether it's, what pro-life issues are out there for kids today. I mean, like pretty much anything that might impact. Last week I did one on the Canadian Saints, and I always have an interview with somebody just like you do. Usually it's an author or a lawyer or somebody that I'm talking to, something with youth though. And so we might talk about, I was talking with the senior legal counsel at the, oh my gosh, now I'm going to, Americans United for Life. And we were talking about the importance of building a culture of life among our teens today, and the abortion issue. And then, I was talking to a lawyer from First Liberty about the importance of being able to practice your faith in public school, and what are some of the cases that are going on in our country today, and talking to authors about their individual books and sometimes different themes that we have. And in fact, I even spoke with some guy from Patchwork Heart Ministry, about, the importance of outreach to college students. So that's what they like to do. And then I usually review something at the end of the show. It's a 28-minute show, and I'll review a book or a movie or something related to entertainment for youth, usually trying to bring to the attention of the listeners maybe a great Christian teen book out there, or like I reviewed like In the Heights and some other movies, just to kind of talk about current events that are going on.
That is so cool. And you mentioned that word ecumenical, which I think, is awesome. It's not an area many Catholic podcasters delve into, because, everyone's kind of concerned with, oh, this is, our territory. This is the Catholic Church. These are the rules. These are the right. But talk about a little bit, making it relevant for Christians across the board, and what that's been like, and even some of the response you've received from the different people listening and the different audiences.
It's a real blessing, because I mean, look, let's face it, like what, 95% of what we believe is probably overlapping with the rest of Christianity, and when we're talking about issues that impact our kids, and we want our kids to grow up to be happy and healthy, and to love Jesus and love God and live out their faith and make good decisions. You don't have to be Catholic to be able to figure that one out. All of us are sort of struggling with the same issues, and there's some really great books out there written by non-Catholic authors that are doing the same thing. They might be fantasy books, they might be books set in different times in history. And of course, I have to, use some judgment in what I'm going to do with the show, because you're right, there is a limit at some point. So when I say it's ecumenical, I interview people of all different faiths, and I don't really emphasize the, what faith are you or anything like that. We talk about, issues, and you'll find, if you listen to the podcast, what you find is, I mean, we're all talking about the same thing. I mean, we're not talking about doctrinal differences, that split the Lutherans from the Catholics, because frankly, that's not all that relevant to helping our kids right now today, and to giving them hope. And so thankfully, that isn't the kind of a focus that I have on the show. If it were a doctrinal show, I would definitely run into that. And I have, like I said, I say it's ecumenical, but like, I have an author on, I'm talking about Saint Joseph, and, I was talking about the North American martyrs, the Canadian saints, so it's not like I'm not talking about issues that are also Catholic issues. It just depends on who I'm talking to. But I felt like, because I although I was a cradle Catholic, I did leave the church for several years and was a born again Christian for a while, and then came back to the Catholic Church after, actually talking to a Catholic who knew history and introduced me to Carl Keating's Fundamentalism and Catholicism book. And once I started learning history and reading the Apostolic Fathers, I was shot. I was stuck becoming Catholic again, whether I liked it or not, because it was the only thing that made sense at the time. So I understand because of that. I sort of have I feel like I have an understanding and an affinity for our Protestant brethren out there, and I don't have any problem with having conversations, because I mean, like, I mean, we all know people who aren't Catholic, and most of what really matters to us when we're raising our families is not something that should be dividing us.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the things that we have in common is that, with this show anyway, sowing hope, because Ann and I always say the same thing. Like, this is a show for everybody. We don't hide our Catholicism. We don't, we preach the truth. We teach the truth of the faith. But we've interviewed people who have encountered Holocaust survivors, all people across the board, different authors and stuff. And there's so much to learn. And the other thing too is, and we maybe can comment on this a little bit, especially for our young people out there. I like to say we're playing an away game often as evangelists, right? Think about playing baseball and we're playing in the other person's stadium right now, right? Like, this world is so secular. And so, as you author books, as you talk with people about the issues that young people face, maybe touch on a little bit of some of what you found, some of your advice that you have for young people out there. We have a lot of parents, young people that listen to this show. Um, so maybe what's your advice for the best way to play an away game out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to realize, although we're playing an away game, our teammates, we're all on the same team, and in this away game. And we all know Catholics who are not particularly faithful Catholics. And a lot of times I feel more affinity to a very faithful evangelical than I do to a kind of a fallen away Catholic, because I can tell that the evangelical and I, we're playing on the same team, we're playing the same game. And and so it's not a time for us to sow division. And I really love the title of your podcast, Sowing Hope. That's one of the reasons my shepherd's pie tagline is a slice of hope to raise faithful kids, because I think we need to be hopeful. There's too many things in the world that we could be cynical about right now. And what we need to do is focus on, the hope, because we know that God wins in the end. And we know no matter how tough it gets, God is in control of this. And so there's no reason for us not to have hope in the end, even though there's plenty of bleak things going on in the world. And so, my best advice to anybody is, when you're dealing with youth, find ways to engage with them. We don't have to be preachy to them about anything. That's why, I write these books for youth in a way that isn't preachy, but that, faith is organic to the plots and to the characters. And a lot of other authors are doing that. And I always like to plug, by the way, my colleagues. I'm one of 16 Catholic authors at a website called catholicteenbooks.com. You may have heard of it, yeah. But there are a lot of really good Catholic authors writing books for Catholic teens in all different genres. Some of them are historical fiction. Corinna Turner over in the UK has her I Am Margaret dystopian, series that's out there. And there's a lot of us there. So I'm not the only one doing this. And as I've been talking to a lot of these Christian authors on my podcast, I realize we're all trying to do the same thing. And most of us are doing it at the level where we realize the enemy isn't other Christians. The enemy is the enemy, right? And that is, the one sowing division out in the world. And we're all sort of trying to accomplish the same thing. We're trying to bring our kids to a place where they can be safe from some of the the dangers that are out in the world, and usually those dangers are not coming from Protestant doctrine. Those dangers are coming from people who are really trying to bring our kids away from God and to an atheistic society, and not to mention drugs and abortion and anything else that goes with it. So I do think it's important for parents and anybody who works with youth to realize there are a lot of good resources out there. We can engage with our teens where they live, and sometimes that's a little uncomfortable for us as adults, because we don't necessarily like maybe where their journey is at the moment, but we have to engage with them at a place where they are located. I mean, the prodigal son, went away, and the dad had to let him go. But when he was coming back, he engaged with him where he was at, and he didn't, decide to give him a big speech when he showed up.
Yeah, I really appreciate how you talk about we're all on the same team, and that division is from the enemy. I I think that is a really key takeaway. The other thing I think that you're doing so well is protecting the imagination of young people. And what I mean by that is I think there are so many different things vying for the imagination of young people, right? Where you mentioned some of them, drugs, alcohol. That's something that steers the curiosity away. You've got a bunch of other things, occult stuff you mentioned in there. Just things that are drawing people away from the faith. Um, but and having kids imagine a different reality. Whereas when you write books like the ones you're writing, this Harwood Mystery series, um, you're allowing kids, and write and authoring and writing is so important because it allows the mind to put the pictures in, and every kid has a different image in their mind of yeah, the cover of the book gives you a few core images that you can reflect on, but after that you know um, you allow people to explore that. And so taking that imagination, making it go far, is awesome, and you're doing such a great job at that. I want to make sure that we mention where people can find the podcast too, as well. So as we're kind of wrapping up, let people know where they can get that. You mentioned it's on WQPH, and if there's any of those radio stations out there, Catholic radio stations out there, that how they can contact you and bring the shepherd's pie to their radio station.
Thank you. Well, I definitely have that one-stop shopping at anthonykolenc.com. My shepherd's pie episodes every week. I put my newest one on there. There's a interview scheduling form. If somebody thinks, hey, look, I've got a book, or I've got an idea, or I work in a ministry that deals with youth, and I'd love to come on the podcast, there's a place where they can fill out a form. There's a contact sheet. I would love if other radio stations would say, yeah, you know what, I'd love to have your show on my station, because that just allows me to reach a broader audience. And so yeah, I mean, it's all out there. I love what you're saying about the imagination, because you're right. There's too much with our kids right now where they're just watching TikTok videos, or Facebook or YouTube videos, and just laughing at total nonsense. I mean, I see it in my own, kids and people in my life. And it's like, gosh, like if you could be sitting reading a really imaginative book right now, and your mind is, actively exploring the universe or history, or, whatever. I mean, just, get off your device for a few minutes,
Yeah, right.
please. And so, I mean, but you got to give them a reason to get off their device. And so that means engaging with them on an entertainment level. And you can reach kids with fiction and with movies and books in a way that you can't reach them with your catechism class, or just taking them aside and saying, Johnny, let's have a talk about this, because they're not open. Their imagination is not open at that moment to receive. But when they're reading an adventure, and they're living through kind of the character's mistakes or the character's thoughts, and they see, Zan is struggling with forgiveness, they get that, because they have somebody bullying them at school that they don't want to forgive either. And if you could see it play itself out, in the character's life, my hope is that, that is instructive and, informative to them, and will help continue to keep them on the right path. Look, we're all on a journey. Like I said at the beginning of this talk, I mean, I've gone off the path more times than I wish to admit, but God still has the path, for us, and God is a forgiving God. Thank God.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tony, thank you so much for coming on. Folks, I want you to get the Harwood Mystery Series by Tony. It's again through Loyola Press. You can find it anywhere books are sold. But as he mentioned, go to your local Catholic bookstore and patronize them here before Christmas and give it to a loved one. It's for all those ages, 10 and up. Both genders. So get it out there and stuff it in the stocking this holiday season. But Tony, we certainly have to have you back because there's so much more to talk about with you and your ministry. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate being on your show. Thank you for the ministry that you do, both here and also with your Patchwork Heart ministry.
Absolutely. Well, folks, until next time, all this here at Patchwork Heart Ministry, I'm Bill Snyder. Keep beating to your Catholic heart and sowing hope in the progress. Thanks for listening to this episode of Sowing Hope on Patchwork Heart Radio. For more information about this podcast and our ministries, visit our websites, patchworkheart.org and andesantis.com. You can also follow and interact with us on Twitter at PWH Ministry or Andy Santis 2. Today, many students go to college with numerous questions about their faith, yearning to know if the seed planted in them as a child is both true and practical. Using the miracle on the road to Emmaus as a model, young adult ministers conversed weekly for 3 months with college students about the most pressing questions they had about the Catholic faith. As they journeyed together virtually, something amazing happened. Doubts disappeared, fears faded, and Jesus revealed that He is still alive. Hearts Burning Within Us, the latest book from Patchwork Heart Ministry, is a result of that grace-infused conversation. It is the perfect back-to-school gift for recent high school graduates and current college students. Get your copy for them today at patchworkheart.org or by calling 424-704-3278. That's 424-704-3278.